Good afternoon, I'm Stacey Leska with the Los Angeles Times. Yesterday, the world lost a television and movie icon when Robin Williams died at the age of 63. Joining me to talk about his life in pictures and on television is television critic Mary McNamara and movie critic Kenneth Turan. Thank you so much for joining me under such terrible circumstances this morning.
I'm so sad.
Yeah.
I was just personally really sad. When we lose somebody like that, you're always like, oh gosh, the body of work and all this stuff. But it really just, I cried.
Yeah.
I cried.
Yeah, it's really sad. And Kenny, you actually wrote this morning about a personal experience you had with Robin Williams. Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, it was really kind of a two-part thing. I did a story on him in 1978. An editor I knew said, this guy is going to be in a TV show called Mork and Mindy. He's going to be big.
Yeah.
You know, go see him at the Comedy Store here on the Sunset Strip. And so I went to the Comedy Store and I saw him, and he was, now we know you say a Robin Williams performance, we know what to expect.
Yeah.
No one had never seen him before. No one had seen him before, and he was just kind of astonishing.
Yeah.
And I interviewed him after, and I said, we were in this very crowded restaurant, and no one knew who he was, and no one cared that he was there. And I said, Robin, this is going to stop. You're going to be famous. And he said, oh, no, it's not going to happen. And then a couple of months later, after the show came out, I ran into him at an event, the AFI Life Achievement Award. I was about to ask him, how's celebrity been treating you? And we walk around the corner, and this phalanx of flashbulbs goes off. Everyone sees it's him. He's the man of the moment. They're screaming, Robin, 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 Robin. And he turns back to me, and he says in this little tiny voice, this is a riff from The Fly, this 1950s horror film, and he says in this little voice, help me, Ken, help me. And it was spooky then, and it is way spookier today.
Yeah. He obviously touched millions of people's lives over several generations, because yesterday, across every social media outlet, both celebrities who knew him and people who just watched him on film and television were sharing their memories. My dad called me about a plane ride he took with him in the 80s from Boston to LA, and, a couple of our commenters on the site, Burton Green said, a big part of me feels hurt he's gone, and then I remember meeting him and know how much he gave of himself. And so all I want for him is to rest easy and know we all love him. What do you think his impact beyond just fans was on television, Mary?
Well, Mork and Mindy was, it was huge. And then he became like one of those early stars that sort of morphed from one thing to another. There was like nothing he couldn't do, nothing that he didn't try to do. He was a stand-up comedian, went to TV, and then back to stand-up and huge, filling the big houses, and then HBO, later in later years did specials on him. And then, of course, he transitioned into film, and impossibly, it seemed at the time, into serious film. And it was like, and was able to do that. And really, we all always say, oh, the people who are in the most pain are the best comedians. And and he really showed that, because he was able to do both of those things, to be funny and also be like the poignance that he brought to like Good Will Hunting.
Yes.
And then he came back to TV, and I liked The Crazy Ones, and I was sad when they didn't renew it, and I felt like that was a show that seemed almost semi-autobiographical, because it was dealing with an older man who had gotten sober, who had had a wild youth, and he was trying to reconnect with his daughter. And so I felt like people expected the manic Mork Williams, but he wasn't that anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was like a little bit of a disconnect.
Well, let's talk a little bit too about his film career as well, because we asked people, what their favorite films of his were, and of course we got a huge list: Dead Poets Society, Aladdin, Mrs. Doubtfire, Good Will Hunting, Good Morning Vietnam, Fisher King, The World According to Garp, Patch Adams. It goes on and on and on. Kenny, did you kind of like his comedy more, or did you like him as a more serious actor?
I think because I experienced him first as a stand-up, that's my default position, and I liked the roles that were closest to that. I liked Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah.
I loved him in Aladdin. I think if I had to see a Robin Williams film right now, and they said, which one are you going to put on? I'd put on Aladdin.
Yeah.
He was, I think this outpouring is because, this is a cliche that happens to be true with him. There was no one like him. There's no one Robin Williams-esque.
Yes.
It was him. And the things he could do, no one else could do. And there's no one young now that sounds like him. He was just it.
Yeah. So what about his film and television works that were still in the works? Because he, of course, had Night at the Museum 3 coming out. Has he finished those films?
No, I don't know.
You don't know? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Night at the Museum is done, but I think the other one, weren't they doing a sequel to Were they doing a sequel to Mrs. Doubtfire?
He was in the works for that, but it wasn't ever
that's
like
not
put
gonna
into
happen.
production.
No.
Do you think that some of that might have played into his depression?
You know, you can't say, you know,
Yeah.
some of this is just not rational behavior. You can't really figure out
Yeah.
why people get that.
Well, let's talk a little
way.
bit about his impact on comedy then. You know, Ellen DeGeneres, of course, tweeted, "I can't believe the news about Robin Williams. He gave so much to so many people. I'm heartbroken." And of course, Conan O'Brien last night during his show found out about it and announced it to his audience.
Wow.
You know, and there are, again, plenty of other actors tweeting about it. But specifically in comedy, you know, do you think that he really influenced a whole generation of comedians to come after him?
Well, I think just that free form, you know, that just sort of out of your head, non sequitur, just, you know, craziness. But as Kenny said, nobody else could really do it. But it did sort of, it opened up the gates for all sorts of, you know, you didn't have to come out and be necessarily just political. You didn't have to come out and just talk about your, you know, take my wife, please. You didn't have to, you know, I mean, it just sort of went, oh my gosh, you really can do anything, because that is literally what Robin Williams is doing. He's doing anything. But, you know, so you do, and that fast, that kind of manic energy that, again, nobody could match him for it. But I think that it brought, you know, instead of the laid back, you know, more of the Seinfeld, you know, in front of the mic, you did see more like a Kevin Hart, who's like, you know, really all over the stage and just like, you know, using his body and just being crazy. So yeah, I mean, I think he did that. And also, I mean, Mork and Mindy, that was a show that, like, it was so improbable that would work. That again, I think it made television go, oh wow, you really can. We can try all these kind of crazy things.
Yes.
If you have the right people, you know, if you have the right characters, you can pretty much say anything is happening. You can create any kind of alternative universe, including Mork from Ork, with Jonathan Winters as the baby in the egg. You know?
It just goes on. And then of course Sean Hayes tweeted, "There's a few less laughs today. My heart goes out to Robin Williams and his family." He, of course, left behind a couple of children who are also in acting, so maybe we'll be seeing more Williams performances in the future, hopefully, and they can carry on his father's legacy.
Yeah, I mean, again, as Mary said, I mean, I think his role is really as inspiring people to be themselves.
Yes.
No one can be him.
Yeah.
You know, that's not going to happen. And again,
Right.
I think the thing about him, even though he did all these amazing riffs, they actually held together.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, I think if you could diagram them, they actually made sense. He just did them so fast that you could barely follow them.
Yes.
But, you know, he knew what his mind held together. It was amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so besides Aladdin, what's a film that you think is iconic to his entire career that people should go home and watch today?
Well, I mean, I think the one he won the Oscar for. I mean, I think Good Will Hunting, and also we've got Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. I mean, I think that's a good, solid choice.
Yes.
I like The World According to Garp. I remember that was like such an important film anyway, just because, you know, John Irving, and it was really good, and Glenn Close in it, and John Lithgow. I mean, that's such a great film. It's like, you know, everybody should watch that one. Yeah.
Yes, and of course, a child of the 80s and 90s, I would have to say Aladdin, but also as a Bostonian, I have to go with Good Will Hunting. So
you got all the bases covered.
I got them all. Huge fan. So, well, thank you so much for joining me this morning and sharing your memories of covering him and his career. And if you guys would like to share your memories or your favorite movies or your experience with him on TV, make sure to tweet us at LA Times.